right now, as we do this meeting, but also as we kind of do this transition time as a community, we have had historically this week, the third week of September, as a week of action, a week of events, a week of direct action, signing of letters, delivering petitions, marching, tabling, really kind of a history of this as an opportunity to get out into the community and get engaged with community members around the idea of basic income, help promote and share the work that's happening in their communities, specifically around the idea of basic income, pilots, legislation, a broad range of what we know are really important opportunities for getting involved, but also victories that we're having across the country. And as part of that, we thought it would be a really great opportunity to host the quarterly State of the Movement meeting during this week. So today we're going to spend some time together really focusing on the idea of community and how do we build a community together here within our own kind of ecosystem of organizations and activists, but how do we also invite more people to participate and join the community? And so with that, today we're going to talk a little bit more about the work that's happening in pilots, the work that's happening in community engagement, and also some work that's happening with the Movement Building Coalition, specifically around new ways to invite more people into the conversation around basic income. And so we'll really kind of follow that thread of engagement and community involvement as we move through today's conversations. One of the things that we thought would be a good framing for today also is a reminder at the big conference this year in Chicago, the theme and idea of grassroots and the importance of base building, especially over the course of the next year or two as a movement, feels really of critical importance to folks in our community. And the role and opportunity that pilots play in being base builders in kind of those community almost kind of building of many movements in regions and states was highlighted pretty consistently at the big conference. And so we thought we would start today really inviting a couple of amazing, inspiring folks who are leading pilots in the space who are also deeply committed to community engagement and community involvement in the work that they do in their regions to chat a little bit more about that. And so I'm very, very excited to introduce Kevin Scott from Just Income and Melody Webb from Mothers Outreach Network. And this is actually going to be a conversation between and with and by them. So I'm going to introduce them, and then we'll actually just we'll pin Kevin and Melody up on the screen so that they can start to have a little bit of a conversation about the work that they've been doing, both related to their pilots, but also in that community space, community development space. So here's some introductions. I'm going to be reading from some bios. So hold on to your seats because these folks are awesome. So Kevin is from Just Income. He was born in Washington, D.C., so a connection. Melody is based in D.C. He was raised in Florida. He's a longtime Gainesville resident with a passion for social justice and community organizing. He serves as the project director for Just Income, which is the largest guaranteed income project in the country by and for formerly incarcerated folks. He's an outspoken advocate for criminal justice issues and prisoner rights, and has been involved with the Florida Prisoner Solidarity Group Coalition since 2016. Kevin has been a pivotal voice in several grassroots campaigns leading to policy changes around the use of prison labor. And Just Income, that's part of Community Spring, has been doing amazing work in the legislative space as well. I'm sure we'll be able to hear a little bit more about that connection between pilots and legislation and advocacy. And then Melody Webb. Melody is the executive director of Mothers Outreach Network. She's a graduate of Harvard University and Harvard Law School. She spent her career practicing public interest law, both paid and unpaid. She supervised public interest attorneys as legal director for the Employment Justice Center and public interest attorneys as pro bono counsel for the Neighborhood of Legal Services Program and the District of Columbia. In addition, Ms. Webb has represented indigent parents throughout the council, through the Council for Child Abuse and Neglect of the DC Superior Court, and served on the DC Superior Court, the Court Improvement Program Advisory Committee. So we're going to be able to hear a lot more about all of this amazing experience and rooted leadership in the space to, as we hear a little bit more about the pilot that that Mothers Outreach Network has launched in the last year. She's been helping build a direct cash coalition in DC for the past several years and recently launched the Mother Up pilot in Washington, DC. So super excited to hear from both of you lovely and amazing folks. And I'm going to hand it over to Kevin, who's actually going to both be a participant and a facilitator of the conversation. Take it away, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. That's amazing. Melody and I talked like, it must have been like nearly 2 years ago or something now. It's been quite a while before we had even launched. So like, I'm so excited to reconnect, and I am going to remember that I have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so I'm excited to listen way more than speak, especially when like talking to somebody as amazing as Melody. So I guess maybe just for, a background question on like why you all are doing what you're doing. Why did you all choose to focus on families impacted by child welfare services, and how has that entity sort of impacted folks where you are?
Okay, yeah, I want to first just thank you, Kevin, Stacy, Erica, and Chelsea, and the whole team. It's been really wonderful to work with you all over the years. You've been an inspiration, and Kevin, the work you all have done has been, really amazing and inspiring. So as for your question, I want to kind of give some background and make sure we're all on the same page in terms of child welfare, as some call it, and some people believe that's a euphemistic term. The system itself is shrouded in myths and misunderstanding and stigma. But here's what this sort of abuse and neglect system really looks like. It's known as child welfare. Some advocates are calling it family regulation, and even more so family policing, to characterize its intrusive and surveillance-based nature. So it's a system of child protective services agencies, judicial officers, attorneys, foster institution, and vendors that get involved with a family following reports of abuse and neglect, from the investigation stage to the possible permanent separation of a family. And I want to dispel a myth about the child welfare system and the cases. The vast majority of the cases in the system are actually neglect related, and most places in the country actually use poverty factors as a determinant of a status of neglect. So why focus on families in this system? I mean, the short answer is that the stark structural racial inequity in this system, which I think resembles what you see in the criminal legal system, it reflects underinvestment in families and communities. And it really, however, as our pilot, we think, will illustrate, lights a path for government policy to really address a deep racial and social inequity through alleviating poverty. And so doing that in the context of Black families, it is really powerful and necessary. And as mentioned, I served for several years as a parent defender, appointed counsel for parents living in poverty in Washington, DC, when children were removed from their homes. And as a racial justice advocate, what really motivated me is what's based on my work as an attorney, doing that day in and day out work, and the advocacy on a broader policy level was obvious to me after doing this work for some time. There's vast inequity, and again, just really driven by poverty. And the CPS agencies take reports of abuse and neglect. Parents, for example, don't have a right to an attorney at the inception of an investigation, and they're subject to a threat of removal, but they still don't have a right to advice of counsel anywhere in this country, with the exception of New York, where there's sort of a practice rule that in effect gives parents that right. But unlike, again, in a criminal law context, in most states, You're also not required to be read your rights. In addition to not having access to an attorney when you find out that you're subject to possibly being separated from your child permanently. Some families, and hence the term regulation, are really subject to ongoing supervision, monitoring, and of Black families, mirroring other places of structural inequity, are disproportionately likely to be investigated, to experience removal and permanent separation. Historically, this has been the case with Indigenous families, and increasingly so with Brown families. So, and I'll finally just share, because the data is really striking, that 37% of all children in this country experience at least one CPS investigation by their 18th birthday. We have a family surveillance nation here. And then 53% of Black children experience an investigation by their 18th birthday. You know, again, shockingly, because this is also a system that impacts disproportionately people who are impoverished. 28.2% of white children are also impacted. And I can tell you more about the cash policies in this that relate to this system that are just deeply disturbing. But I'll stop there.
Yeah, I obviously there's a lot of differences and a lot of similarities between what's happening there and what we're focusing on here. And like, impossible to talk about the world of incarceration without talking about the incredible disparities in people's economic and racial backgrounds. I mean, it's just baked into the cake at this point. And I know that was really striking here. We're in Alachua County, which is Gainesville, Florida. Our Black population is about 21%, but 70% of our recipients, which is just like a striking, huge gulf between what, the population and who's being incarcerated. You're 9 times more likely to be arrested in this county if you're Black. You're not 9 times more likely to be dangerous or actually causing harm. It's just
right.
That's the reality. That sort of like steeps, antiquated, yield racism is just really, really present here. And I think maybe somewhat similarly, there's, the system is held up as doing public good, but in fact, the supervision, the, huge amount of condition is actually causing a tremendous amount of harm, and your likelihood of being reincarcerated if you're under supervision is, astronomical.
That's right.
Yeah.
Lots of parallels for sure.
And so I know I would love to hear some about Mother Up and like what has happened, like what is the intervention and how's it been going so far?
So yes, so Mother Up is a cash pilot for Black mothers in the child welfare system in DC. And again, as you mentioned, the disproportionality is just striking, with 52% of the children being Black in DC, or rather 52% of the children in the system are Black, and 82% of the kids in the city, just as 52% of the DC's children are Black and 82% of the children in the system are Black. So, similar parallels to what you mentioned about the composition of the community in your county. So the pilot is for Black mothers for that reason, that disproportionality reason. We sometimes get questions about that. And Black mothers and whose children are involved in the child protective services or child welfare system, and they will receive or are receiving $500 a month for 3 years with no strings attached and no work requirements. And these are moms who are eligible for and receiving public assistance. So it's up to about 250% of the poverty level. So these are moms who are living in deep poverty. The children are children that are 14 years and under. And that is so that they're still sort of subject to CPS or child welfare system involvement. And our goal is really to measure the impact of cash on re-involvement or deepening involvement with the child welfare system. So the structure of our pilot is in 2 phases. So we have launched a phase with a very, very small number, which is similar to some pilots around the country, including the Denver-based income pilot, which I know started with a really small number. And as you all know, that is a way to kind of look at some of the challenges, iron out those kinks. So we've started with 5 mothers, and next month we will enter our 6th month of operation. And the pilot is the money is provided with no strings attached. We're seeing some early, great outcomes anecdotally. This part of our pilot launch is a soft launch. So we don't have a research institution working with us, but we have conducted initial surveys and will resurvey our moms in another month. And the idea is, again, to thwart re-involvement or re-entry in the child welfare system. The moms seem to be thriving. They're reporting that they are better able to buy school supplies. I mean, very basic, and essential items that, we as parents or have had children in our lives can, absolutely relate to. One of our moms has been able to actually put a down payment on a home and a voucher based program, which she never would have been able to do in the past. And in fact, this is the first large space she's ever lived in her entire life. And she's just so pleased with the benefit she's seeing to her children. So in phase 2 of our program, which will launch very late this year or early next year, we will be working with a research institution, which will then essentially conduct surveys and and interviews. It'll be a mixed methods approach, and we're really looking forward to that. We're still fundraising. Our goal is to include at least 50 mothers in our pilot, and we're about halfway there. So we're really excited about this pilot, and are happy to share more information offline with anyone who'd like to know more details.
That is so awesome to hear. That's amazing. That's amazing. I love the unconditionality, again, comes up oftentimes as how important that is for people to have the flexibility to address their own lives in the ways that make sense for them and their families. That definitely echoing some of that down here as well. And I will say too that for women of color, within the carceral system,
Mm-hmm.
that is the fastest growing demographic, and no coincidence that women of color bear the vast majority of the financial obligations that they're trying to support their loved ones who are inside, covering legal costs. I mean, it's women of color who are absolutely running themselves ragged trying to keep up with exorbitant debts, also supervision, all these things. So amazing to see what's happening there. I think it's really, really gorgeous. It's really awesome. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's with the example of what you all did early on, and so many other pilots around the country have really kind of shown us the way. And it's really exciting that so many different demographics, people in different situations are getting to participate in these pilots.
Are you obviously giving people money is important, and let's keep doing that more and more. But are there any bigger picture policy visions, things that you're sort of aiming at? Maybe a long term.
Absolutely. I think it was Madeline Naley at Economic Security Project who talks so much about pilot to policy. I mean, we're all obviously working toward a broader, kind of legislative outcomes. And so this is really meant, in our case particularly, to demonstrate that this very marginalized group could absolutely benefit from a broader guaranteed income policy, a guaranteed basic income, enshrined in law and across the country. So that's our absolute goal. And I mean, many would say that we've already proven that guaranteed income works, that basic income works, but there are still these, groups that are at the margins of society, like people who are recently incarcerated and families who've had contact with the child welfare system, that are just, I think we have to make a special case and really demonstrate the efficacy of providing this and the stabilizing role of providing cash to these families. So our work has been, and very recently we've seen how the pilot connects to policy. So we've been working within a coalition and learned so much from our coalition partners here in Washington, D.C., who include residents and workers and others who've operated pilot programs, and we've learned so much from them. And so we've had some legislative successes, some disappointments as well. But most recently, as an example of the pilots illuminating policy and giving us a chance to address it, has been our unfortunate encounter with, a barrier to getting a DC law enforced with regard to our pilots. This law was passed to protect the benefits of participants in pilots. And unfortunately, we're hopeful, having some difficulty getting our local human services agency to actually acknowledge and actually, kind of enforce the law that would protect SNAP benefits for our pilot participants. So we can now speak from like direct experience about, how this could really damage, the stability of our families who, on the one hand, are receiving this extra cash, but now face the loss of their SNAP benefits. So, this is the intention of these pilots, to eliminate the need for changes and ways to strengthen our social safety net that exists. I think we all want to keep this current safety net and really want to build on it.
Yeah, it is exciting when like things go well, and it can be discouraging when we hit the hurdles. But I will say, like, I've had like a pretty emotional week. It's pretty intense, and then just even like coming into this space with other people who are like working on similar things, or something like very like encouraging and emboldening to be, I don't know, just sharing and in the work with other people. It feels good. I wanted to share too. I know Stacey kind of hit it earlier, just to mention some of the good things that have happened here. At least, we started giving people money with total agency. You run your life. And then like, it's been exciting to see some of the ripples that have come from that in policy. So in December, by centering, amplifying people's voices who are typically marginalized, the city actually moved forward with a fair chance hiring ordinance, which is the first in the state to do that, giving people with records actually a fair chance to get a job. And then a few months ago, similarly based on campaigns centering our folks, they did away with all unnecessary jail fees at our county jail. Wow. and moved to make all of the phone calls free and unlimited, which is great. I mean, 100 reasons why that's great, but connections with family on the outside. And then also like, those of us who can least afford it are the ones who are paying for all of those phone calls and jail fees. So, redistributing power and money to folks who really need it most.
That is amazing. That's phenomenal. I know the burden, I know the financial burden that it places on families to make phone calls to their loved ones who are incarcerated. So that is quite a significant win. So congratulations on that.
Yeah. So thanks. So I wanted to hear, I know we're short on time, but like, maybe if you could talk a little bit about like community engagement and why that is important for you all.
Absolutely. So our organization's mission is really to accomplish its goal through like organizing and bringing impacted people together. And we were so happy to have a couple of our moms on the panel at the big conference. I wasn't able to see them, but I know they did a great job and really building advocacy and awareness and, working one-on-one with people who are impacted and really, having their voices amplified as much as possible. Our format for our meetings, we have monthly meetings, coalition meetings, is to include and lift up the voices of our parents in our coalition. Also, because we're sort of a diverse coalition of workers and parents who work primarily in the home, they're included in our activities and the planning and serving as moderators and participants and panelists, and we are intentional in doing that. We actually have a program coming up in October, a monthly program that will include a significant portion of storytelling. And we're actually potentially going to spin off of that a bigger separate storytelling effort. So, it's really just rooting ourselves as much as possible in community and including and working with community hand in hand and supporting them. And as from a legal perspective, as a lawyer, we talk about it as movement lawyering, that our lawyering is in service to the goals of community change. So we try as an organization to foster that through our coalition work as well.
Well, I can't wait to see how everything continues to progress there. It's so cool to have had these conversations.
Okay, I think I froze or you froze a minute, so I didn't hear you if you asked a question.
It could be on, actually, I think the issue is on my end. I apologize.
Oh, okay, no problem.
No, I was just saying, I can't wait to see how everything goes with you.
Oh,
the excitement of having talked before we even started to now seeing both of these projects sort of like coming into reality.
that's right.
And everything. It's very exciting.
Well, Kevin, I hope you'll come back to speak to our coalition, you and your colleagues, as we put on a related program about men and Black men in particular in the coming year. Really excited about, we've been talking about what you all are doing for a long time, trying to get our city leaders to see your story as, inspiring enough to create a pilot for men who are returning from incarceration. And, in fact, from people who are returning from incarceration. So thank you for that work you've done.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin and Melody. I think the community piece, I know actually that that both of you have events happening this week as part of the Day of Action or supporting events that are happening in your communities. And it's a really great, and so I know you guys might have to bounce before the end of this meeting, but we love hearing from both of you and your organizations that you've been pretty significant participants in organizing and hosting events in your communities over the years. And then Melody, I think this is this year's Day of Action. It's your fourth Day of Action, third that you participated in. And you always do amazing, the photos of you guys marching through Washington, D.C. and are always some of the highlights of the Day of Action. So really love having you here today with the broader community. And it's maybe a good opportunity to highlight a little bit more about what is happening with the Day of Action this year, because it's focused on film screenings, and actually both of you are participating in film screenings this week. And so we thought maybe we would spend a few minutes giving some updates, again, thinking back to the big conference and some of the broader conversations that have been happening around the community around this idea of how do we activate, educate, support our local community members of getting involved in this movement. And this Day of Action is that's here set to launch today. It's actually more kind of a week of action, because with film screenings, there's different days of the week that work for different folks across the country. But Melody, I know you're hosting something actually later today, in DC. Do you want to share what film you're screening?
Yes, we are so excited to host, to screen Storming Caesar's Palace about guaranteed income civil rights era activist Ruby Duncan. Really excited about it's a hybrid event being sort of streamed on Zoom, as well as in person at the Martin Luther King Library in downtown DC. If anybody's in DC and wants to join us, welcome.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, you're one of many cities who are hosting that specific film, as well as some of the other films. And I wanted to hand it over to Chelsea to highlight and share. She's been leading the support side of all of these amazing organizations and activists who are hosting events this week. So I'll hand it over to Chelsea to talk a little bit more about what's happening across the country.
Thank you, Stacy. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I am kind of the direct action campaign manager. So my role in the Basic Income Day of Action has really been to support all the amazing different like grassroots volunteers. There's been pilot organizations and even some like government entities that are hosting a film screening. And yeah, just to like support them and also then connect them to the filmmakers and create like graphics and get the word out. And this year we have over 20 different film screenings happening all across the country. And then there's also a march happening in Denver, Colorado, not California, with that's hosted by Denver Basic Income Project. And then there's a few marches in Portugal, Spain. But yeah, and these, we really wanted to focus on film screenings because this is such a kind of great activity that someone can do to in their community that, you know, starts to have like really impactful like conversations and also addresses like each of the different films, which the filmmakers have been working with us is Storming Caesar's Palace, as Melody mentioned, Inherent Good, and Raising the Floor. And each of these films are so unique and about basic income and also tackling different narratives that we know our community has to kind of confront. I guess to like quickly summarize, like Raising the Floor to us is a really great film about like what is going on with all these pilots and how did we suddenly have like 100 more pilots happening, and that energy from the pandemic, of how like during the pandemic it inspired people to really like look to cash as a way to help folks and seeing that impact. And then Inherent Good really dives deep into the like inherent dignity that all of us have and that we deserve, you know, just our basic needs and that kind of support and believing in the inherent good of everyone. And that one focuses on Salinas, Tennessee, and how kind of like the rural impact of manufacturing like displacement has affected a lot of different communities. And it also highlights and tells the story of the Magnolia Mothers pilot. And then Melody, you gave like a great kind of synopsis of Storming Caesar's Palace, but that one is like really rooted in like the history of our movement and how this movement has been around for decades and decades. And so, yeah, it's really exciting that like, and I think it's so important for our community and our movement to have these events, because direct action, like taking action together and also building community, is really at the heart of a movement and what powers the movement, what inspires people. And yeah, so it's just really exciting that we kind of this year have, you know, a unified kind of effort across, like from someone who's just an everyday kind of believer in basic income to then someone who is leading a pilot and involved in all that administration and has been doing deep community work, and then even some government entities hosting. One that then I think in Alexandria, Virginia yesterday, they had theirs. And they had some city managers and mayors attend, but it was also open to the public, and so community members also could attend.
Awesome. One of the things that besides, you know, the opportunity to invite community members to start to learn more, that happens with these events, is also actually an opportunity for people who maybe are new to the idea, who haven't heard much about it or get inspired during the event, is providing direct action for people to immediately be able to take to participate in the movement. And so one of the pieces, there's a I support basic income sign-on letter that is in many ways kind of a singular action point that anybody across the country can sign, add their name to. Any organization across the country, any elected across the country can add their names to. And that really is an opportunity for us to, one, show the strength and numbers of the movement, but also an opportunity for, if there's, amazing opportunities to pass and support legislation like what Kevin and Melody were talking about happening in their local areas, we're actually able to help communicate to people like, hey, there's this piece of there's a budget hearing right now for your county, and they potentially are deciding if they're gonna support a local pilot. Like, get in there and give some testimony and make sure that this thing gets prioritized in your area. So it actually is this really amazing unifying kind of central repository of all of the support and a harnessing mechanism for us to be able to help people find their next steps in support of the work that's happening. So we can drop that the sign-on letter. This is something that a lot of the folks who are hosting events this week are actually sharing with their communities. And we also have some pilots who were really excited about participating but ended up not having the bandwidth are doing social media campaigns tomorrow. And so we can also share some of the hashtags. So folks who are hosting events can post photos and some of the experiences from this week of action. But then also if there isn't an event happening in your area, but you want to join in the conversation that's happening online, feel free to use the hashtags. You can track Basic Income Now, as well as Basic Income Day 2023 is a way to be able to just be in community for a little while tomorrow, add your own thoughts, your own ideas, and also to see what's happening all across the country, see the community events as they're happening in real time and being shared in real time. Any other thoughts that we have? I was actually curious, as you were mentioning, Chelsea, the films, to know how many folks here have actually seen the films that we just shared. And maybe we can do a little show of hands, going into the reactions button along the bottom. Raising your hand. Can folks on the call raise your hand if you've seen at least one of these films, Inherent Good, Storming Caesar's Palace, or Raising the Floor? Sweet. Hands are going up. I love it. All right. Now keep your hand up if you've seen at least two of these films. Let us know how. A little bit of a smaller group, a little bit smaller. How about if you've seen all three? Keep your hand up. Well, I love this. I love actually to know that there's a lot of us who haven't had a chance to see all of these amazing films, like that, that we've had a chance to at least see one, most of us, which is fantastic. But we definitely will share some opportunities. Two of the films, Inherent Good and Raising the Floor, are actually available on Canopy, which is essentially Netflix for educational purposes that a lot of local school systems, school districts, universities, as well as library systems have access to. So if you have a library card, you most likely, this is just a cool resource just in general, you most likely have access to Canopy, which is spelled with a K, and has a pretty amazing list of films, a library of films, but two of our films are on there. So if you haven't had a chance yet to see either Inherent Good or Raising the Floor, then definitely, and all you need is a library card, and you can usually just go in and set up your account and then go and search just like you would on Netflix or Hulu or whatever it is that you like to use, and you can find the films and watch them. And then Storming Caesar's Palace, they're still doing a lot of their kind of national campaign tour. That was been part of the PBS series, and you can see the link there, links to the PBS website that has the film on it, and I think there's some additional information there about how you might be able to watch the film now or in the coming days, coming weeks and months.
Yeah, and Raising the Floor is even on YouTube now.
Oh,
and
nice.
then I think with Inherent Good, it's also like on Netflix, I think on Apple too, and Hulu. So
It's available. I think it's on, I don't think it's on Netflix, but it is on Amazon. You can order it
oh yeah.
through through some of those tools. Lots of opportunities to access them. They're great films. And we do have one of the things that we've been doing in lead up to this this day of action is supporting pilots in building conversation guides that also are connected specifically to the idea of narrative change and the role that the films can play in narrative change. So we are happy to share those with the broader community as well, that for your own kind of edification, but also if you're interested anytime in the coming months of hosting an event for your team, for your coalition, or for your community, there's already kind of some preset great tools out there for you to be able to use. We'll follow up from this meeting and share some of those pieces. We did also want to share some important developments that are happening in the Movement Building Coalition. And so for folks who aren't aware of the Movement Building Coalition, this is a coalition that really has been that has been organized and come together over the course of this year. It's really kicked off with a survey and roundtable sessions with more than 70 folks, the roundtable sessions. And a survey that went out to broad community to understand a little bit more what areas of focus people were interested in doing a national kind of movement building coalition together, and what the work could look like of at a national level if folks who are doing very hyper local work or state level work came together to start planning and coordinating around that national space. And so we actually have gone through, we've had 4 meetings, we're about to have our 5th, and we have identified and determined what our first project, the first national movement building coalition project is going to be. And the focus is going to be on a national narrative change campaign. And so this really is an opportunity to start to bring together the work that's happening locally, the work that's happening at state levels, the time to bring together research and messaging data and all of the information, influencers, electeds, all these amazing resources, and start to pull it together into a national campaign that's driven through a broad range of channels. So there's a project team that is just forming to actually build out a plan for what a national campaign around narrative change could look like, some opportunities for impact, how we're going to measure impact, what budgets are needed, what resources are needed in order to be able to reach different impact levels. And so if you're interested or excited about this idea of a national narrative change campaign and you are wanting to be involved in the coalition, somebody will drop a link into the chat with a little form for you to fill out. Right now, the Movement Building Coalition has over 110 folks that are part of it. 70 of those folks are regularly attending meetings. 40 of those folks have identified hours in the month that they're ready to give to doing this work of building a campaign and helping implement that campaign. We have over 300 hours across the community that is in the coalition, 300 hours of time every month that people are kind of ready to give to having a highly effective first national campaign. So we're really excited about that, and definitely stay tuned, because obviously any national campaign is going to be a big opportunity to not only bring some of the work you guys are already doing in the narrative and storytelling space together, but also an opportunity to help amplify and increase the impact and the reach of a national campaign. So we'll definitely be sharing lots with you all as that over the next month or two comes to full design, with the goal of kicking off the campaign in early 2024. So stay tuned. It's very exciting. And then the last piece is and maybe I would love to know how many folks here, maybe a show of hands, are part of the Movement Building Coalition, who gets the emails, it comes to the meetings. We see some different hands going up. Well, this is awesome. There's an opportunity for so many of you guys to get involved if you're interested. It's right now to be part of the coalition. It's a once a month meeting. And then the next meeting is next Thursday. And we're going to actually start to build out a database of existing work in the narrative space so that the folks as we start to build out that national campaign, we actually understand what's already happening and that we're building on the work that's already happening. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Let's kind of leverage and expand on the work that's already happening. And we're also going to start doing some brainstorming around what the goals of that campaign should be so that we can be, really designing out what the structure and channels are that we're going to be activating that campaign in. So if you're interested in sharing some of that information with folks, if you're interested in helping shape some of that, click on that form and let us know so that we can get you invited into the communications chain for that work. I love seeing so many people that are part of it, and I also love that there's folks here that aren't. So this is the first you've heard maybe about both the coalition and or the work that's happening there, which is very exciting. Any other? We have a brief big conference announcement, but are there any other pieces or important things that are happening right now in the community that we have about 5 minutes set aside that we want to make sure that if there's other pieces, other things, other immediate opportunities that people have to participate, we'd love to hear it, love to share it. You can drop it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand because you want to speak for a minute or two, we'd love to hear from folks. What's happening in the community that you feel like we all need to be aware of? And Melody and Colin, are you, I know your hands, I asked folks to raise their hands if they're part of the coalition. Oh, down, okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't thinking you wanted to share something, which you can as well. Conrad.
I'll be very quick. Most of you might already know about it, but we're doing a crowdfund as part of the initial movement building for Commingle that we've been working on for a few years. And the idea is more than raising money, is to raise social proof. I've already been reached out to by a couple foundations and things based on the success of the campaign. So any sharing or small dollar donations or whatever you can support or get out there. I left the thing in the chat, the link in the chat, and appreciate whatever you got. Thanks.
Awesome. And Commingle, Commingle had was at the big conference, they had a table out there, so you may be familiar, but if you aren't, it's essentially a community created, community supported, community focused UBI. So anybody who wants to participate in a UBI right now, once this is up and running and out the door, which is what's this funding piece is about right now, is getting the funding for the final getting it out the door phase. Then folks, anyone who's interested can actually just start participating right away. So
we've got some big matching donors too. So every dollar that comes in now is worth like $7, I think. So will be helpful.
Wow. That's pretty fantastic. 1 for 7.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Anything else happening in the community that we want to make sure gets shared? Okay. So the last piece is is about the big conference. For some of you, it might feel like the big conference was a long time ago, or it might feel like it just happened. It might feel like somewhere in between, or sometimes feel either or, depending on how things are, the work that you're doing and all of that. But we're very, very excited to announce that the 2024 big conference, we're targeting the third week of July of next year, and we are going to be hosting it in San Francisco in partnership with Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. So the pilot is going to be in California. There's amazing work happening there. There's also a conference, a kind of January conference specifically in relationship to the community practice work that's happening there in California. And we're working with them to make sure that in July, we're supporting things that come out of the January work. But we're incredibly excited to be working with Yerba Buena on this. Obviously, so many of you probably know Yerba Buena as a pilot organization. They've been focused on basic income for artists, local artists, and completed a first cohort, and actually are I think in the midst of a second cohort that they're running. And we're working with them to coordinate art exhibitions and include artists in more kind of exciting ways, kind of build on what we started last year or this year in Chicago with the inclusion of artists and voices, creative voices, as we tell the stories and as we get inspired and excited. So keep your eye out for a save the date email that'll be coming very, very soon. And this year, we're really going to be reaching out to the community to understand what are the topics, what are the themes, what are the ideas that we need to dig deep into for that conference. So through surveys and meetings and things like that, we're going to be having lots of conversations with you. So start thinking about what you might think are the priorities for us as a movement when we come together in person next year. But in the meantime, have an amazing rest of your week. Join us tomorrow online, or join events if they're happening in your community. Watch films, be in conversation, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.